All right. Welcome back, everybody. This is another episode of Tattoos and Telehealth. And today we are going to chit chat a little bit about something that has been kind of near and dear to my heart, especially just because it affected me personally. But before we get started, I just want to say, because our lawyers make us do this, that this is not medical advice by any means, and that this video and anything we discuss here does not constitute a patient-provider relationship. But this morning, I want to introduce a dear friend of mine who I met professionally and then became friends with, and that is Melissa. And she has her own telemedicine slash in-person kind of hybrid counseling therapy type. I'm going to let her get into that a little bit more. But we are going to chat about the very awful, very real situation of provider burnout, especially when it comes to nurses, healthcare providers, and why that looks so aggressive, I guess would be the best way to say right now. Whereas, that was something, Nicole, I think that in our generation that we saw nurses, in their 40s, 50s getting ready for retirement. But I mean, now, and I think Melissa would agree, she was even seeing brand new nurses and healthcare providers burning out very quickly.
Mhm.
So, Melissa, what do you feel like is something that you're seeing as like a common theme with healthcare providers?
Um, well, it's interesting because prior to private practice, I was working in ERs in psychiatry, or our psych ER, and then the regular ER because we would kind of consult on those cases. And I think that's where, it was during COVID, like right on the cusp of COVID into whatever we're in right now. And I think that so what was happening in that provider situation was a lot of so there were a lot of nurses that were travel nurses and stuff happening in the ER. So a lot of the older nurses who had been there for a long time and had that tenure were leaving because they were working with a lot of people who were just coming in and out, and the homeless population just kind of blew up at that time and the resources aren't there. And so when you kind of put all of that stuff together, what I was seeing was a lot of we need more resources, we need more tools, and we don't have them. And so that was just in that role, right? And then I move into private practice, so now I'm seeing providers in therapy. So I have all kinds of different clients from every walk of life, but I do see a lot of providers, a lot of other therapists, a lot of nurses, doctors, professors. And what's interesting is I think we're just all trying to keep the balloons in the air, and no one really knows how to.
Tell us a
There's
bit about your practice. Like, what is your practice? What do you do?
So at this point right now, so I have, like you said, a hybrid, but I'm about to move into fully virtual at the end of the year. It just makes more sense at this point, and a lot of people are wanting it. I do have a lot of clients who really appreciate that in person, but there's just so many people who are wanting virtual as well. So it's tough. It's a tough decision, but so my practice is I offer trauma therapy. So I do a lot of the trauma modalities with people. That's kind of my niche and has been for a really long time. And I've always worked with a very acute population. That's just always what I've done as well. And so I really love that. I love working with people who are really kind of rough around the edges. I work with psychedelics. I'm probably going to move out of that a little bit as shifting more into just really focusing on some of these things like EMDR, accelerated resolution therapy, those types of things. So we'll see where that road goes. But done a lot with that. And yeah, I think at this point, most of the people I'm seeing are just, it's a lot of the same story over and over and over, right? We have our trauma from, or adversity or things that we've experienced in our life, but now it's like last week, right? Was hard for everybody. It doesn't matter where you stand on the political spectrum, everyone's rooted in fear of some sort, right? So it's just we're all feeling the heaviness of the fears of these things based on our values. What we're seeing, the all of the information coming at us. Do I have the tools to manage that? I don't know, right? I have people working in universities who feel like, that politics can shift that, or who's in office can shift their job and like what that's going to look like long term. Or, it's like everybody feels like so much is riding on everything that's going on. So it's just fear, I think. I think if you just break it all down, everyone's in fear. So,
I think a lot of reactions just in general with the human population is driven by fear. Even if it comes out as anger or comes out as anxiety or depression, I think a lot of it just boils down to fear because there's so much of the unknown. Like you said, not just this week, but just in general, especially with COVID, with just it's just the way things are going. I know it was hard for Kelly and I as well to go virtual. But the need is so much there. So do you provide care to patients in Texas?
yeah, I may. So we are planning to move out of state in a few years, and we're looking at Arkansas, and I'll probably get licensed in Arkansas. However, I think we're about to have a pact, similar. I don't know. Do you guys have like a pact thing where you can operate in other states?
So not as nurse practitioners, we have to apply individually as nurse
Oh, okay.
practitioners. Our RN license is compact to several other states. But as nurse practitioners, we have to apply individually. So that's kind of
Okay.
cumbersome right now. They haven't passed any legislation to make that compact, which I feel like that's coming. I don't know that it'll happen during our working generation. Um,
Yeah.
I think that states need that money still. And so I think that that's something that legislation may not catch up with while we're still practicing, but I think it probably will.
Okay. Yeah, so my license is as a clinical social worker. So, as therapists, there are a few different routes you can go down to become a therapist. Being a licensed clinical social worker is one of them. And so as the social worker, so the NASW, which is our, governing body, I guess, but they are trying to get that going for us, which it's looking like maybe within the next couple of years. And so I think right now there's like 13 states on it. And so states can kind of join as they go. So I don't know how many will be on that, but then we should be able to operate within all of those.
That's
It's kind of
awesome.
interesting because one of the billing companies I use, they will based upon, so like for instance, I can see people in Massachusetts for this one insurance because they lack providers. So I think little stuff like that is happening as well. People are starting to get creative in these like moments of like, okay, we have no resources, how can we like work within this framework to make
Same
things
during
happen?
COVID. Same during COVID. We could work
Yes.
across
Yeah.
99% of the states as a nurse practitioner during this emergency order. Now, our RN license, which you have to have an RN to have an NP, so why we have to keep both licenses, I don't know. But our RN license is like that. There's states that have joined it and there's some that haven't, but most states have joined it. And so you only have to have one. You have to have like a compact. So it's very, very similar to that where states can kind of join. And every year or two more join. So I'm glad to see that because definitely in your expertise, there is such a demand. There is such a demand for your type of service, counseling, the therapy, the just all of it, the social work in general. So I'm really glad to hear that.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because, we often talk about like the negatives of COVID, and a lot of negative things did happen, and we're still feeling that. But a lot of really innovative things happened too. I mean, the fact that we're sitting here right now is an innovation that who knows would have happened if like, COVID didn't happen. I think even though we were probably moving in this direction, it was like, nope, we got to do it today.
Yep.
And so now it's just the norm, right? Like when this first started, I was so uncomfortable being on video with, I was like, oh, this is so impersonal. Like it just, especially with therapy, I was like, oh, I just don't think I could ever do that. But you start to get used to it. And it's like, wait a second, you can have as profound of sessions virtually. And as a matter of fact, this person can sit in the comfort of their home, with their dog and their blanket, and you have a good session, as opposed to them driving 30 minutes to the office and stuff. So, it's not as bad as I originally thought. So it's been really interesting, actually.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you feel like, I know we kind of got off track a little bit, but what do you feel like has become such a drive for the rate of burnout that we're seeing now? Or do you feel like that is still a big deal?
Burnout.
With
I
providers?
It's funny because I always have to try and zoom out because if you ask me, everybody's burned out, right? But that's everybody I see because I spend all of my days with people who come to me and put all of their stuff that doesn't feel great down on the table, right? So if you ask me, everybody's depressed and everybody's burned out and everybody has trauma, but that's my whole world. So it's hard. I have to like really zoom out and I'm like, okay, not everybody feels this way, right? But you know, when you kind of live in that bubble, you just that's you think that that's what's going on everywhere. But I do see it a lot. I feel like, and I kept saying this, so we just recently went to the Midwest and everyone was so kind. We were in Ohio. It was, I don't know, it was so weird. Everywhere we went, even just the gas station, everyone was just so genuinely kind. And maybe it was a fluke, I don't know. But I was thinking, so I live in the DFW area and I was like, it just seems so aggressive here now. It didn't used to be like this. And I feel like that's part of it is like, because the heaviness of what's going on everywhere, DFW is growing really big. Just it's almost impossible to live. So you add like the cost of living goes up, you can't afford groceries, you have to work multiple jobs. I have multiple clients who have to live with multiple roommates in order just to live as in their 30s, like people aren't they don't feel like they have the stability anymore. And I think added on top of that, there's a lot more aggressive behavior, even if you're not seeing it out and about because you're online all the time. Everyone's aggressive online. So you start to be in that bubble of like, everyone's aggressive. I hate my job. I have to work 3 of them. I have to live with these people that I wish I kind of had my own space. I can't. I have no one that I can really talk to because now my family's polarized because we have different political views. It's like there's nowhere to turn that feels safe or good anymore, I think. And a lot, even so, there's still a lot of people who aren't getting out into nature anymore and things like that. That was one thing I saw during COVID, which was really awesome too. Anytime I went on the trail, there were like hundreds of people, and I was like, yes,
bikes were on a shortage. Bikes were on a shortage. Like it was.
They were,
yeah. It was great. Yeah, it was great.
It was awesome to see, and I was hoping it would sustain, but it hasn't. But anyway, I just think that I think it's that immense pressure. It's like a pressure cooker and people feel like they can't get out of it. And you just have to work for it a little bit. But I think it's just it's that, I don't know if you've ever had a job where you like go in, you're like gung ho, really excited, but then you feel the vibe, everybody's burned out and it just sucks you right in. And I think that's kind of where a lot of people are.
So do you think that has contributed to the younger population of providers coming out of school rapidly burning out, like faster than what we would expect because they're responding to the environment that they're in?
Yes. So it's weird because I'm on a lot of therapist pages, like Facebook pages, because I like to see what other people are talking about. You're kind of on an island as a therapist because even if you work in a group practice, and you probably experience this as well, I mean, you probably work closer with providers when you're in person, but we don't work with somebody else. We're in sessions all day and you may have 2 minutes where you're going to the bathroom. So there's not a lot of time where you're talking and getting to, just do that chit chat. Right. So I like get on these pages and it is actually incredible the amount of burnout that therapists talk about. And I think sometimes it's working for like agencies like community mental health where you have way too many patients at a time and you're making no money. And that it's just hard because so in a therapy session, you're in it for an hour, right? You are 100% of your soul is online, right? Like I am holding that space and every word that this person is saying, I am taking in, right? I am hearing, I am conceptualizing like what can we do here? How can we work with this thing? Like you 100% of yourself is there, right? And you're doing that for, 6, 7, 8, 12 hours, right? So in community mental health, you have people coming in who are homeless, have severe drug issues, have no family, you have limited resources. You're trying to hold all of that space for all of these people, and you're doing it at a grand scale. And then they're just putting more cases, more cases, more cases. So I see that's really hard. You can't sustain that. That is unsustainable. There's not enough of me to put into that space, right? So I think that causes burnout. And then, but in private practice, I think it's weird. I'm seeing this so much, working with insurance companies, people that burns people out. Again, I think that's based in fear of these clawbacks of like coming after you and telling you you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, things like that. I think, just the heaviness that's brought to the table is hard to maintain long term.
I think the tension of everything, the angst of everything, just you're constantly on the edge of everything all the time. Like you were talking about going into work in a good mood, but you also read the room, right? And the tension you can cut, just everybody's angst. And it may be individually, everybody has their own story, right? And everybody has their own things that they're dealing with. So even if you're into a situation where everybody is just in their own head trying to deal with their own life, then trying to take care of other people around them as well, or you could have everyone working on that. Maybe it's a company issue, and so everybody's having the same issue, and then that also can cause angst. I think just there's tension everywhere. Like you said, you go to some places and they're really nice, and I can tell you, like, I see patients nationwide, but specifically, I'm not saying other states are rude, so I'm not saying that. My Arkansas, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee patients are awesome. Like, they are always pleasant. Always, always. That doesn't mean everybody else is rude. I'm not saying that. But if I get somebody and they're like super nice and sweet and just genuine and just now I see people at their worst. So does Kelly. So do you. Like, we all see people at their worst. But when people can still not feel well and present to you in just this best pleasant that they can at that moment, like, it's a breath of fresh air. And I always look and I say, oh, I bet you're from Arkansas. Like, I always look to see what state they're from, because a lot of times it's Arkansas, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee.
Yeah, it's fascinating that there's like a morale, just like in a job, right? In a state. It's pretty fascinating, how that works. I think that, what is really interesting is we also have our stuff, right? And we have to put that on the back burner too. And I think that's the other thing people struggle with. We've been doing this for so long. I've been in this field for so long. It's very easy for me to like compartmentalize that stuff and like, okay, like my stuff is my stuff, whatever, not a big deal. But I do think that that's hard for people, especially right now, because like you're talking about all that tension. And for some people, that is not so easy to do. And honestly, I'm not saying it's a good thing that we can do that. Honestly, I see a lot of providers, nurses, different providers who that's why they're coming to therapy, is because they've been putting their own stuff on the back burner for too long, right?
Yes.
And pushing that down and all the trauma they've been through, like nurses, especially in like ICU type situations. I mean, that's a very traumatic job. So I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing, but you think about that dynamic difference. Like, as a therapist, as working full time, it is a one-sided relationship. I am showing up, I am providing that space for all of these people to unload. Now, what if I didn't have a place where I could like be authentically myself and be able to say that? Because that's not what's happening with my clients, right? That's a one-sided relationship. So they get to unload and unpack, and I'm holding all of that. If I don't do anything with that, well, then I'm gonna burn out, right? And I don't think that people are doing the self-care that they need to do. We're all guilty of it.
Providers aren't. I'm not. No, I mean, we're just not. We're just not. They're so, and I think it just comes with like being healthcare providers in general, just like, you know, the three of us, like, we didn't come into this field because we want to, you know, we're selfish and want to care about, you know, ourselves. We want to put other people first. And so that kind of comes with our territory, but it comes at such a, I don't know, like the more you do it, the more you're aware of it. But, you know, obviously the more burnt out you get. But I think that it is just at such a high scale that right now, healthcare in the nation, there's such a shortage, specifically in mental health. But even in just primary care, in just care in general, there's a shortage. And so, you know, I can see X amount of patients, but there's so many more that need help. And at the same time, I feel defeated because I can't, maybe I can only see, I'm just making a random number, but maybe I can only see, you know, 15 patients a day. And I want to see 20, but I can't because that affects my quality of care. But then, so I feel like, yes, I've helped 15 people, but I still carry with me the others that I couldn't help. You know, like Kelly and I both come from ICU trauma world. We save a lot of lives, and that's something we should celebrate. We have saved hundreds, I'm sure. But at the same time, there's those ones that we lose that really take a toll on us. So even though we've saved, you know, 100 people, you know, that child or that young person or that, I mean, even the elderly as well, it's a little bit rougher for me to see trauma with children and young adults who didn't have that life to live. But you can save as many, you can save 1 million, but if you have a couple that you struggle with, you're still going to struggle. So I think that
you carry that.
Mm-hmm.
We carry that with us forever, you know? And I don't think that people really realize because, you know, and I'm sure, you know, me and Kelly have talked about this in the past, but I don't know how much, you know, but that energy, right? Like the energy that comes from every single person we come into contact with, it's not just like, oh, this is the situation that's happening. There's so much more that's happening that we carry with us. And we don't realize that when somebody puts their trauma on us, we pull that in, right? We carry that. And we have to do different things to release that from ourselves, right? And I don't think people fully realize, you know, and so instead they're like, okay, I'm going to get off work, I'm going to go party, and then I'm going to get 3 hours of sleep and, you know, rinse and repeat. And you're never fully releasing all of everything that you took on that day and doing what's right. Because when we have a traumatic event happen, so exactly what you were just talking about, you are trained to deal with those types of situations, but you're still a human being. So when you see something like that happen, that is now stored inside of you as an experience that was really difficult. You will carry that with you, you know, and that's one of many, many, many of those, right? So, you know, we just can't, just because it's another Tuesday, we joke about this because I'm a clinical supervisor. And so I have supervisees under me, and we joke about, you know, the provider joking, you know, when we work in hard situations, we always kind of have a dark sense of humor. But the joke is that, I mean, they all work in very, like, one of them works in like the worst, like parts of CPS. Another one works in like the psychiatric ICU at another place. And so I'll always say, anything interesting happened this week? And everybody's like, no. And I'm like, that's hilarious, right? Because of course, everything that we do is interesting, but to us, it's just another Tuesday. So I'm sure you saw crazy wacky stuff all week, but it's just like, we're so used to it, right? But that doesn't mean that we don't carry it just because we're like, oh, of course that thing just happened.
We're just good at putting it in the backpack and carrying it along.
Yeah, exactly. But then it causes its own issues when you don't deal with that stuff. So yeah. And we are in a collective trauma, I think, like a collective, you know, we've had generations and generations of a lot of things happening and nobody really knows what to do with it. So I think that's where we're kind of at as a society.
I like to tell patients that, you know, talking about that, you know, nothing happened this week. It was, you know, just another Tuesday. We as providers make that our normal. You know, just like we say that, you know, like you were saying earlier, oh, I'm going to go party, have a few drinks, 3 hours of sleep, rinse and repeat. That's their normal. Well, that doesn't mean that it's okay. like this may be your normal and this may be what you do, but that doesn't mean that that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's sustainable. It doesn't mean that it's something that's going to get you through long term. And it may last 2, 3, 4 years before you're burnt out, as opposed to a 20, 30, 40 year career before you're ready to retire. And I think that's what is so concerning to me is that we have this, I can't even say generation because it's affecting multiple generations, but we have this group of peoples that are in a bubble that cannot sustain, and they have not been able to get out of their bubble to look towards retirement. Like they're just flipping over, flipping over, flipping over, going from one to the next, because what they're doing is not sustainable. So they're doing this for 2 or 3 years, flipping over, doing this for 2 or 3 years, flipping over, doing this, and they can't seem to find any normalcy. And so we have this country of illness and fatigue and chronic symptoms and chronic diseases because
Mhm.
of this snowball effect that began, who knows how long ago, but was certainly exacerbated by COVID. I think COVID just turned the light on. I think that these things were happening, but when COVID showed up on the scene, it was like the lights went on, and so now we can see what's happening.
Mhm.
And it just became exacerbated by that. And so I think that that's the biggest issue that I see, especially amongst some of my patients, is that they just can't create a sustainable lifestyle. And, I try to let them know that they need to be able to do things like, Melissa was saying earlier, where they have to be able to release and they have to be able to find ways to do this. And as soon as, and I don't know if Nicole has noticed this or not, but as soon as you mention, talking to a therapist or going to therapy or going to counseling, or as soon as you mention those words, it's like, oh, I don't need to talk to anybody. I'm like,
Yeah.
I go to the gym, I'm good. I'm like, no, that's not, you know what I mean? Like the gym doesn't teach you ways to, you know, do EMDR. The gym doesn't teach you ways to do, you know what I mean? Like that, like those, it's very difficult. So what would you suggest as a mental health provider to providers like us? How would you suggest we approach those issues with our patients to get them to understand and be willing to reach out to someone like yourself?
Um, Man,
Like, how do we approach that subject?
isn't that the question? Well, and I just want to say, I do not think that therapy is the end all be all of anything. I think people can very much heal in spaces that aren't therapy, right? However, I think where we're at and the reason why people are seeking out so much therapy now is because people do not have a a truly judgment-free space
Yeah.
that's unbiased where they can unload. It does not matter who you have in your life and you think, oh, I could just tell them anything. We have a filter. We filter with everyone based upon who is in front of us, and the things we're like, oh, we may not even realize we're doing it. I think the best thing is like if you have a good therapist. I mean, just like in any profession, not everybody is, the best. And I hear those stories too, but there are a lot of good therapists out there, and it should be a completely unbiased space for you to be able to unload. And that's number one, right? And that's not really therapy, because therapy are these modalities of helping you work through things, but that's the base, right? And that is a beautiful thing to have. Everyone really needs that to really be able to explore your authenticity, your own values, as opposed to what's being put on you. It's not, I don't know. I think people have a different ideas on what therapy is, but it really can just be a space of exploration, of getting to know who you actually are, and what this means for you. What does all of this mean for you? How are you going to navigate it? How do you release these things? So I think sometimes people think it's a lot of stuff that it really isn't. And so how do you convince people to do it? I don't know the answer to that, because the truth is it's a value system just like anything else. I mean, some people are just like, we don't do that. That's in my culture, that's not what we do. My parents are, have never been a fan of mental health care. Oh, that's all BS, right? You're gonna have those people, and then you're gonna have the people who are like, I go to therapy religiously every week. It's like it's a spectrum. But I do think I just try and make it very, if I'm talking to people about therapy, is like taking it off of that, like, oh, it's this very formal place where you're like, have to talk about everything bad in the world. The cool thing about trauma therapy, EMDR, ART, even parts work and stuff like that, you don't even really have to get into the deep, dark story of what happened to heal from it. And I think that's the other thing. I don't want to talk about that stuff. Well, you can heal from it without even having to speak the story, right? So, I think it's just helping people see it's not probably what you think it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I really like that explanation of it's not really what you think it is, and it really can be anything that you want. So are you accepting new patients? How can they find you if some of our viewers want to catch you? How, where, that kind of thing?
So as I said, I'm moving to fully virtual at the end of this year. So, I do have, so I currently have a wait list, but things change constantly. People are moving in and out pretty regularly. So I'm kind of on multiple platforms, but there's just places to find resources anyway. So this is kind of helpful anyway. But so there's Alma. Alma is actually I work with them and they do billing for insurance, but they're also a really good resource to find providers, whether it is therapists or there's a lot of like nurse practitioners and physician assistants who do like psychiatric medications on there that you can find as well. So that's kind of a good platform. Psychology Today is another one where you can find different providers, same kind of gist. I always call it's like the dating apps for therapists. And you can just swipe right if you don't want that therapist. But it really is a list of all these different therapists and they kind of talk about what they do. So I'm on there, and then I have a website, and my practice is called Feel the Rain Therapeutics. And so that my website is, my info's on there as well. But yeah, there's, it's interesting because I know there's a ton of therapists out there, but I also hear that it's hard to find a therapist. So I think
Yeah.
Oh, another good resource though, and I just want to share this because it's like a sliding scale therapist resource. And this is really good because they have a lot of like people working on their clinical hours. So these would be like licensed master social workers who are working with a supervisor, and there's like LPC associates, which are also working on that. So their sessions are $30 a session, which is really accessible. And they have someone supervising them all the time. And then there's also other therapists, and they will charge anywhere from 40 to I think 70 a session. And it's called Open Path Collective. And I use them as a referral source all the time. I have a profile in there, but all those spots are full right now. But a lot of therapists will use that to, just kind of as a giving back and trying to, just have those spots open for, that lower amount. And so that's really helpful. So
What's that website again?
It's called Open Path Collective. And I think there's just like you pay a one-time like fee. I think it's like $50, and that makes you a member as a client. And then you just find your therapist, and then y'all agree on an amount, whether it's like $40 or whatever a session. And that one filled up for me very quickly. But it's a great resource because this stuff, like it's expensive, and so to be able to find providers for a less amount is good. So
yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We definitely appreciate your time. And Kelly and I, you guys know, you've seen us. You can find me at hamiltontelehealth.com, and you can find Kelly.
You can find me at karihealth.com. And then, of course, if you need absolutely anything at all, you can reach out to Melissa at Feel the Rain Therapeutics. And even if she cannot get you in, she has given you some amazing resources to find some other providers. But We hope everyone is safe, and we hope that you at least take away the fact that self-care is not selfish. Please take time for yourself. Please take time to reach out and find someone who can meet you where you are and help take care of those issues for you.
All right, guys. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.